Microsoft and the UK are going at it, and we've got some spicy new Activision acquisition details. It's getting spicy, my friends. So we've already been through the gauntlet of what is going on with the Activision acquisition. And it's, well, Brazil's good with it, Saudi Arabia, whatever, is good with it. But now the UK is coming out fighting, and Microsoft, I think they're flipping a few tables up there in Redmond over some of the claims that are going on related to this acquisition. So new documents were dropped, and just so everybody's aware, there are a couple important dates coming up related to specifically this deal being approved in the UK. They said they're going to issue a preliminary ruling sometime in January, with the final ruling likely happening in March. So let's dive into the details, but before we do that, let's recap sort of what's going on. Microsoft has to apply through all these regulatory bodies to get the acquisition approved. Initially, the UK said, look, we need to take a closer look at this after a quick phase 1 review, which means they're now in an infamous phase 2 review. And so that's where we are, and that's where these documents come from as part of this review and including Microsoft's rebuttal. Keep in mind, some information is redacted because they're not going to reveal all the spicy financial details, and some of them relate to Sony, so they probably legally can't because that's not their information. So let's roll the B-roll of Call of Duty clips classically as we dive into what is going on here. So the CMA, which is the regulatory body that is reviewing all this, came out and said, we're not so sure that this is a great deal, and there's things going on. Now, full transparency, I kind of expected this from a lot of agencies just so that they can sort of tighten the screws a little bit and get what they want out of Microsoft before approving it. But some of the quotes that they came out and said, there is a realistic prospect of a substantial lessening of competition in gaming consoles, multi-game subscription services, and cloud gaming services if Microsoft were to acquire ABK. They go on to say, the CMA is concerned that having full control over this powerful catalog, especially in light of Microsoft's already strong position in gaming consoles, operating systems, and cloud infrastructure, could result in Microsoft harming consumers by impairing Sony, Microsoft's closest gaming rival's ability to compete, as well as that of other existing rivals and potential new entrants who could otherwise bring healthy competition through innovative multi-game subscriptions and cloud gaming services. Now, that is sort of the argument that we've all sort of been expecting, is that, like, look, Microsoft's a $1 trillion company. They have a really powerful desktop OS. They have a really powerful cloud infrastructure. Obviously, there's other entrants in the cloud like AWS, who's the market leader, and Google Cloud and others, and Oracle and IBM, and everybody's got a cloud these days. But they're basically saying, like, look, Microsoft's really got two really powerful segments, and giving them ABK in the gaming space would make them have a third, like, really powerful, or probably fourth, honestly, really powerful segment, which is valid. I tend to agree with that. In response to all of this, Microsoft sort of came out, and you could tell that they're a little feisty. They're a little feisty over this. And so these are the statements that Microsoft issued in relation, and I'm cherry picking here some of them, in relation to the CMA's concerns, as pointing out that they're basically misplaced. And the one thing I will point out before I even start reading these is that, much like Brazil, the CMA appears to be taking the stance that they're protecting Sony and not the consumer. So just kind of keep that in mind. The CMA's concerns are misplaced according to Microsoft, with them saying Sony PlayStation has the largest console platform for over 20 years with an install base of over 150 million consoles, making it larger than Nintendo and more than double the size of Xbox. Xbox is believed to have somewhere around 61-ish million. So keep that in mind. That's Microsoft's argument. This is coming from Microsoft, not some third party. Sony engages in contact today, which is reflective of its market power in console gaming, including increasing the price of its consoles without fear of losing market share. Keep in mind, Sony just announced that they were increasing the price of the PlayStation 5 abroad. So that is directly related to the UK. And the suggestion that the incumbent market leader with clear and enduring market power could be foreclosed by the third largest provider as a result of losing access to one title is not credible. Microsoft is straight up calling them out, saying like, look, if we pulled Call of Duty, let's just pretend that they did pull Call of Duty off of PlayStation, it would not collapse Sony. And that is Microsoft saying very clearly that it is not credible that one single title is keeping PlayStation alive, because there are more than 4,000 games available on PlayStation alone. Microsoft goes on to say the evidence shows that the redacted number of PlayStation monthly active users are playing Call of Duty. We don't have the actual figures here, but Microsoft points out, even without all of those gamers, so all of the people who are playing Call of Duty on PlayStation only, even without all of those gamers, the PlayStation gamer base would remain significantly larger than Xbox is today. Microsoft basically saying, in the theoretical world that they pulled Call of Duty away from PlayStation as an exclusive, which Microsoft goes on to say they will not do, the PlayStation user base would still continue to be larger than Xbox. That is how big of a lead PlayStation has. And now Microsoft goes on to continue the beration and says, since the transition was announced, Sony has acquired several game studios, including Bungie, developer of the popular online game Destiny 2, Haven Studios, and several others, and a minority interest in From Software, the developer of the biggest game of 2022, probably you've heard of this, called Elden Ring. And so Sony, or Microsoft's point here, is that Sony is just going out there and buying up studios, and they said that there were over 280 exclusive first and third-party titles on PlayStation in 2021. That is 5 times as many of his exclusives as there were on Xbox. This is fascinating that Microsoft is willing to die on the hill in the public limelight. It's like, look, PlayStation has a lot more exclusives. It's funny just to watch them actively try to make themselves look small after all their marketing tries to make them look so big. And so they're like, look, PlayStation has 5 times as many as exclusives as Xbox. Therefore, your point is moot. Now, Microsoft goes on to very, very clearly say that Microsoft has no intention to take Call of Duty away from gamers, meaning on the PlayStation, and indeed, it has publicly committed not to do so. The value of Call of Duty depends on its community of gamers, the majority of whom are on PlayStation. Keeping Call of Duty on PlayStation is therefore a commercial imperative for the Xbox business and the economics of this transaction. As such, Microsoft has offered Sony a contractual commitment to continue supplying it with Call of Duty, including new releases and features and content parity. So Microsoft is once again just reaffirming that they have no desire to pull the game away from PlayStation. It would be crazy at this point, as I've pointed out many times, for Microsoft to pay nearly $70 billion dues for ABK and then to rip it away from PlayStation, thinking that all those gamers are just going to flock to Xbox and they're going to make a whole bunch of money. Microsoft doesn't actually believe that is the case, and that selling it on PlayStation is imperative to actually making this financial transaction make sense. Really, just to make sense. Now, this is where it gets really interesting from a perspective of Microsoft trying to make themselves look small. Team Xbox, or Microsoft, says Xbox as a platform, which is in last place in consoles, 7th place in PCs, and nowhere in mobile game distribution globally, has no incentives to do this, meaning pull Call of Duty from PlayStation. Instead, its incentive is to encourage the widespread adoption of cloud gaming technologies by as many providers as possible to engage in the major shift in consumer behavior required for cloud gaming to succeed. Microsoft pointed out in their statement that cloud adoption gaming, like your cloud streaming, is actually relatively low. It's like really small. And that's why Stadia has basically bowed out, and that Microsoft, they need to just figure out how to get more content in more places. And as of right now, let's keep in mind that Sony is not allowing Game Pass on PlayStation. That is a Sony directive that they cannot sell it. So that's up to Sony to bring it. And as of right now, Microsoft's like, look, we just need more titles to make it more attractive. And finally, in a statement to GameIndustry.biz, who did a wonderful write-up, which I will link in below, Microsoft, they said, argued the suggestion that the incumbent market leader with clear and enduring market power could be foreclosed by the third largest provider as a result of losing access to one title is not credible. Microsoft issued that as a separate statement to the journalist, because they really want to point out that losing access to just Call of Duty, which is where all of the focus has been, by the way, it's Call of Duty, it's not so much the rest of the titles. So it would be the hilarious outcome would be that Microsoft, yeah, you can go buy them, but you can't take Call of Duty. You got to spin that into its own. I guess that is a real possibility, but Microsoft continues to focus also on mobile because they have zero power in that segment effectively as of right now. So what is going on? What is going on? What's the nutshell version of this? The UK has come out and said, look, Sony is going to be demonstrably harmed if this deal goes through. Potentially, I should say, according to their own language. And Microsoft's come out saying, like, look, they are the market leader. We are in 3rd place in consoles, 7th in PC, and we can't compete, and that's why we are trying to get more content to be able to compete more effectively. And by the way, the biggest title on the planet, Call of Duty, at least in my opinion, biggest title, I should say, in first-person shooters, is going to remain cross-platform. Microsoft, I guarantee the only thing they really want right now is they want content and feature parity on both platforms. As of right now, we all know that PlayStation has an agreement with ABK to land that content early, although now, this year specifically, Xbox has access to the campaign a week early, so they both have their place. Either way, there's nothing, like, this is just watching how Microsoft is positioning. It's just more details and knowledge about how is Microsoft setting itself up to really kind of, because we're going to see the same argument, by the way, in the FTC and the EU, but the UK is the first one where we're getting a lot of the guts and the bits out early. So we got to wait till January, because that's when the next ruling will come out. Microsoft continues to remain confident they will get this deal done, although the UK is definitely throwing a wrench into things. So now we need to wait for the EU and the US to come out and start offering their statements. And we are going to get a lot more spicy details, my friend, because I suspect that the EU and the US are going to go a little bit deeper than potentially even the UK. So as always, my friends, if you want to stay updated on everything that's happening in the ABK deal, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.